how does a war thousands of kilometers affect us here? Lots of people, like, I think the majority of people saying like, Ukraine, war in Gaza, why does it affect us here? Why don't we worry about the people being shot on the Cape Flats? Why does the ANC care so much about what's happening in Gaza? So it's important firstly to realize that the prices of food is determined by the war in Ukraine. I mean, one of the worst things that happened was that food prices skyrocketed. And it's part of the reason why the African presidents went to Russia and to Ukraine to tell them, look man, this is having an effect on our food prices. We poor, so we're talking about grain. But also, of course, it has impact on the price of fertilizer, energy, oil, because of trade routes, etc. So no war is good globally because we are so connected globally. It's not good for us. But also, the war in Palestine is, like Nelson Mandela said, it's often repeated, we're not going to be free in South Africa if the Palestinians aren't free. And that actually means like all people across the world, if they're not free, I mean, how do we enjoy our freedom while other people are living under the tyranny? Besides the fact that people on the Cape Flats are not experiencing the fall of missiles being shot at them. So I think that is important, that people need to realize the differences, and that the war certainly, it doesn't do us good because we get affected by it, the supply. I mean, for example, I think like at one stage we couldn't get Gillette blades because they were imported from Russia, I think, or from Ukraine, and the war affected that. So basic things like that, I mean, who would have expected that basic things like that would affect us here in South Africa because of a war thousands of kilometers away? Again, I mean, it's important for us to differentiate between, you see, what is happening is that the Israelis want us to believe that it's a fight between Jews and Muslims, and it's not. Because Palestinians are both Christian and Muslims. Okay? 98% of Palestinians are Muslim. But there's 2% Christian. So if you Christian, like Jesus was a Palestinian Jew. So he was a Palestinian. And so people growing up in that area, especially if they were Christians, they would be Palestinian. They'll speak Arabic. So they'll say, Inshallah, MashaAllah. They'll refer to God as Allah, because Allah is the Arabic word for God. I mean, what other words are they going to use? So they'll use phrases like that. But it's important to realize that also that the Israel of the Bible is not the Israel we have today. And the worst part is that the Israelis, that's why they're called Israelis and not Israelites, they realize that. They know that we are not the people of the Bible. And therefore, the strict and Orthodox Jews, the Hasidic Jews and strict and Orthodox Jews don't believe in the state of Israel, because they're saying we can't have a political entity, a Jewish political entity. So for example, we know that in the Bible it was the kingdom of Israel and the kingdom of Judah. They don't have a king today. They've got, David was the king of Israel. So was Saul, who came before him. So was Solomon, who came after him. But they don't have a kingdom today. And if they want to be the Israel of the Bible, then they must have a kingdom, not a republic. They've got a president today. And of course, then it was much, much smaller. The kingdom of Israel was much, much smaller, because it was then made up of Israel, Judah, Galilee, etc., etc. So those are they're like the obvious. And then, of course, there's a whole contention with the temple as well. The temple was destroyed by the Romans in 70 AD. It was never rebuilt, and it can't be rebuilt. because of Jewish theological reasons, So a lot of people make that mistake to think that the Israel that we are dealing with of the Bible is the same Israel today. It's not. It really isn't. Because Israel today is a solution. They didn't come up with the state of Israel because they were good Christians. The people who came up with the state of Israel came up with the state of Israel because they felt bad for killing 6 million Jews in Europe during the Second World War, and because they wanted to get rid of the Jews in Europe. And so they then created this. They had 3 spaces, Palestine, Uganda, and Argentina. And then they chose Palestine because it was under the British and it was easy. The British could just donate it to them. So that's exactly what the British did. So what happened in Palestine is more or less what happened here in South Africa. These guys are just coming from anywhere. They're coming, but there's people living here already. Take their land. And so that has been what has been happening in the last 75 years. Lots of politics also about two-state solution, but it doesn't seem to be viable, at least. The ANC still believes in the two-state solution. But at the moment when you look at it, so for example, there's Gaza and the West Bank. Okay? These are 2 territories like provinces. Gaza is about a third of Cape Town in territory. Right? So a third of, so very small. And Gaza and the West Bank, so up until 1967, Gaza was ruled by Egypt and the West Bank was ruled by Jordan. So Palestinians could live there, but they were living under these other countries. They didn't have their own country. 67 war breaks out and then Israel wins the war. So Israel conquers Gaza and the West Bank, the Golan Heights in Syria, and Sinai, which is in Egypt. Eventually, through the years, they let go of Sinai, gave it back to Egypt because of peace accords, and the same with the Golan Heights. Although at the moment we hear that there's trouble in the Golan Heights as well. But what they then do is, since 67, is they go and they occupy. That's why it's called the occupied territories. They go, their soldiers are walking around in the street. If you're a Palestinian, you must show them your pass, like we had here in South Africa. They're soldiers, so they're basically running the show, and if they decide, no, they're going to come and destroy this garden, that's literally what they do. And so Palestinians are olive farmers, and they do that. They destroy their... But to make matters even worse, what Israel has also been doing is in these territories, not so much Gaza, but certainly the West Bank. And the West Bank includes places like Bethlehem, Nazareth, which is biblical places, Hebron. What they do in the West Bank is they build what is called settlements. And what is this? This is like estates. Like we have estates, gated estates in the West Bank. And they literally pay Jewish people from all across the world to come and stay in those settlements. So they're building these settlements in Palestinian territory, just taking Palestinian territory, taking Palestinian land, building these estates, paying Jews to come and live in there, in Israel, and giving them free accommodation, free house, so that they can just get the numbers of Jews up. And so, again, like I say, it's easy for people to say it's a fight between Jews and Muslims. Of course, even Muslims here locally, they all say, that Hamas and Hezbollah, that there's a religious connotation, and there is a lot of religious connotation to it. But even that it makes the fight a bit difficult, because fundamentally it is about a fight for human rights for the Palestinian people. Absolutely. And I think that is important. You're right, there are concerns about what they call theocracies as opposed to democracies. So theos being the word for God, where a divine, you're ruling by divine decree, whether it's the church or whether it's clerics like you have in the Islamic Republic of Iran, for example, where clerics are running the show. Clerics are the government. So there are concerns about that, about it. And so by and large in democracies, there is a push towards a secular state, where the state doesn't take on a faith, right? But that it is influenced by faith. So Americans, for example, would clearly point out to you the separation between church and state, but that faith and state, there's influence on that. I'm a bit more worried that we've had a lot of trouble with secularism. So for example, part of the challenge that we have in South Africa is that important things such as justice is not important. But when you look to the Bible, justice is very important. When you look at charity, when you look at love, when you look at peace, I mean, if you go through the list of the Beatitudes, for example, those are things that can't be proven by science. How do you prove love by science or justice? How does science explain those kind of things? And so that is where the state, when it becomes too secularized, it starts to lose those things. It becomes very materialistic. Because then what also happens is if you take God out of the state, things become relative. So why can't I smack you? It's right for me. So how I treat the next person is entirely up to me. And I can call the other person names and I can degrade the other person because there's no higher authority that I must be accountable to. Because I'm the higher authority now. So if we take God out of the picture completely, then that is what you are left with. That each one is then just for himself. I become God. And what I do therefore and how I treat the next person, who you to come and tell me kind of thing, is the thinking that we have. And that's why it's always important to have God in the picture. Yes, we're not saying that we want a theocracy, this must be a Muslim country or a Catholic country. But for example, if 98% of the people are a specific faith, that's going to influence the country and the laws, because then 98% of your politicians will also be of that religion. And that's how it becomes. So I think that tension is still there, definitely. Well, the two states means that the Palestinians will have their state and Israel will continue to exist. That's what the Palestinians, whereas we're moving, because of the settlements, we're saying, no, that's becoming impossible now, man. Let's just become like South Africa. Remember, even during apartheid, there was two-state solution. You had the Transkei and the Ciskei and Zululand, and we wanted all these people to go to those territories, and Cape Town was for colored people. And then 1994, we said, no, man, we're going to govern over each other. And of course, that debate is going on even now, with some people saying, no, the Western Cape must become independent. Why? Because, I don't know, colored people are the majority here. Yes, that is, but what we've seen certainly in Israel, and even Israelis are saying it, it's becoming fascist. So just like Hitler started to kill Jews, that's what they're doing to Palestinians now. So it's becoming a bit more than it's becoming a bit more than just, you see, because even Israel itself declares itself as it's a Jewish state, yes, but it's a secular state as well. So there's these contradictions, and that's part of the problem. But is it becoming a fascist state? Even Israelis commentators are saying it's becoming a fascist state, because how Netanyahu runs the country is like a dictator. I mean, he himself is under a lot of pressure at the moment to resign, even before this all started, because he didn't want to appear in court for corruption charges, and he tried to change the laws so that now these are the signs of a dictatorship. just to stay in power at all cost.
Who's his rival?
Well, his rivals are weak because there's Labour, there's Likud, but his rivals are weak at the moment, and it's an indication of Israeli society, like it is of Palestinian society. New leaders need to emerge. One of the first case studies that we have of interference in election was the 1994 election of Yitzhak Rabin as the Prime Minister of Israel. And the Democrats particularly came in. Clinton went to Israel and campaigned for Rabin. It was good because Rabin was together with Shimon Peres and Yasser Arafat. These were the kind of what we know as the peace of the brave, which someone like Benjamin Netanyahu opposed. Obama was a bit more softer during his presidency because I recall that he also went to Israel at one stage to campaign against Netanyahu because he couldn't stand Netanyahu. So we're not, as the ANC, I don't think it is good for us to interfere with the internal politics. Israelis, just like, we can become a bit impatient with the PLO as well, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, because there's no movement from their side. Hence, Hamas has taken the headlines. I mean, if I were to ask you, who's the rival to Hamas in the Palestinian territory, you won't be able to say. But the sister party of the ANC in Palestine is actually Fatah. And only recently we started to engage Hamas. So I think that to answer your question, we don't want to interfere. They must decide for themselves, just like we wouldn't want anybody to tell us, no, this one must be your prime minister, this one must be your president. For example, let's use Hamas. So 2006, I told you the history. 2005, 2005, 2006, Israel decides to pull out of Gaza. Remember, they were occupying West Bank and Gaza. They then pull out of Gaza, and what the Palestinian Authority then is have elections. So Hamas wins in Gaza. Fair and square. Democratic elections. Credible. But of course, America is now not happy because they consider, like they considered the ANC, a terrorist organization. So they're not happy. The same thing happened in Egypt before the current president, the organization which is called the Muslim Brotherhood. So they got rid of Hosni Mubarak. The Muslim Brotherhood then comes in, elects a president, Al-Sisi. Or not Al-Sisi, Morsi. And Morsi is deposed through Al-Sisi. So, yes, the problem often is that sometimes these Western countries look and then democracy takes place, but then they don't like the outcome of that democracy or the outcome of the elections, and that's also when they interfere. About 2-3 years ago, I don't know if you've ever heard of STEM.
For school, like...
Science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. There was a lot of emphasis on that. Science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And about 2 or 3 years ago, President Ramaphosa actually added CAC afterwards. He said, no, we must start to concentrate on STEMAC. Science, technology, engineering, mathematics, arts, and culture. Because there's skill there as well. And I don't think that we have cultivated that skill. Part of the problem, the whole shift, especially at the university level, part of the whole problem with the shift to STEM was that there was this looking down almost on arts and culture. You want to be a painter, you want to be an artist. Well, look at me, I'm an engineer, I'm better than you. What do you, when you ask a child, what do you want? I want to be a civil engineer. Got no idea what that is, but I want to be a civil engineer. And what we're trying to do is to make sure that arts and culture comes because it feeds. It does feed people. yes, I think that is important, the point that you raise, it's a very important that you don't want to also what we call commodify it. Because that's ultimately what happens when you commodify something. A few people emerge, you exploit those, and they like charge like, I don't know, what, 30,000 Rand for a 15-minute appearance, you know. So it's not only those artists, but they come with huge amount of money and fees to precisely because there's this commodification now of the arts. When in actual fact, what we want to do is just give everybody an equal opportunity to explore their art and their culture, and no matter what it is. So certainly there is a shift, and I can tell you even now in this election campaign, we've made sure that we've told them that what needs to happen is that we need to have an approach to artists and sport fraternities, because this is where the people are at. Whether it's throwing darts, the dart club, or whether it's the pigeon club, or whether it's the dominoes club, or whether it's like sport, people playing sport. So we've also seen that, and I think that the kind of concerns that is raised is best illustrated in Athlone Stadium. The guys who are involved in the arts and culture at Athlone Stadium will like tell you how everything was just shifted completely away from Athlone Stadium and taken to Cape Town Stadium. And that indicates to you where the emphasis is at. Again, moving it to where people already have. Why are you taking it away from Athlone, which has access to so many youngsters who can do with such facilities in their community? And so we've certainly from our side seen that shift has definitely been there. But that there are artists out there are sports people out there who are fighting every single day to make inroads to get into the gap, and that's not being given to them. So again, the question is, you don't want government to pay artists every day, but how do we make sure that our artists are respected, for example? So I give you an example. The Americans were quite upset with us a year or 2 or 3 even ago of the Copyright Act that we were putting in place. And we simply said, if our producers and our artists produce something, they've got the right to their copyright. Because what was happening is that at the moment artists don't have that protection. So you have a case like, I think it was The Lion King, where he just took the song and they never paid the royalties. And there are a number of artists who are saying that. Jerusalem became a hit. But like, is the group that's singing, I don't even know their name. But are they like getting that royalties of that song and where it's being sung, etc., etc.? So those are just a few examples. But I think what is important is that we must be able to recognize those clubs, those sports at that very local level. We're not talking about big names here and big brands. No, we're talking about there. And of course, that has ripple effects. Keeps our children off the street, makes them not join gangs because now they're belonging to a club. So it is a very interesting thing. I mean, even on Saturday, I was doing a presentation, and we've got a huge problem I don't know what the DA is, if they have this problem, but certainly we have the problem where young people are not interested in the kind of politics we do. And the church also has the problem. In the church I go to, young people prefer these days social media and TikTok. That's where you'll find them at. They'll rather belong to a Facebook page that talks about the issues than go and sit in a hall on a Thursday night to talk about the exact same issues. So this is just how generations, with the influence of technology. And the question is, how do we as political parties keep up with that development? And so again, I pointed out, but political parties might struggle, churches might struggle, because even when we met with the Jewish people, they were also saying, hey, we got problems with our young people. And yet sport clubs have them. Cultural clubs have them. So something is happening there. and that is doing there, that is attracting them. They're going on a Thursday night there. You know, they don't mind going to do the sports club, go, etc., etc. So I think that is part of the things, and you're absolutely right. It is one of the things that, and that's why the president highlighted it, because we're not tapping into that cultural aspect of things, and not exploiting, but using the opportunity that is being presented by the arts and the culture.
Is that rolling? Okay. Audio is rolling.